Welcome back to West Coast Unplugged, everybody. I'm Bo Daniel, and that is
Cole Daniel.
Well, Daniel. What's happening, man?
Oh, shoot, not much, Dad. Just got off work earlier today, man. Banged out 53 and a half hours, dude. Had an early day in between somewhere, dude. Wait, where are you going?
Listen, I had to black this out so we don't get the glare, buddy.
Oh, shit. Yeah, dude, chilling. Another week. Nothing new over here, Dad. Same shit, honestly. I ain't got nothing really new this week. That's where I'm at. What about you, man?
Doing the 6 days on. Well, Cole, I know you know what's going on in my personal life and stuff, and it's not always easy, man. We set out with good intentions and we want to help, in life. Our parents get older and they need our help, and it's okay, that's what we're here for, but when life gets busy and you can't seem to juggle too many things, too many heavy things at once, it's like you have to be able to step back and take a look at yourself. And I think I kind of explained this to you just in conversation. It's you have to regroup yourself and step outside of yourself and look at what you're facing and make a priority list. What the fuck are my priorities? Working yourself to death and hoping things will come out okay, or jumping in and taking action. It's kind of what happened to me. I kind of got swooped up, and your grandfather, helping him out is never the issue. It's all the things that you got going on besides that. So it's hard to single out, and focus on certain things. You want to do the right thing, but sometimes your approach to it could be the wrong way or something like that, along those lines. And I can find myself getting, too many jabs or too many comments. I can get ultra sensitive in an emotional state when I'm in it, and I keep it to myself and I don't say much. And when I take those, I get fucking angry. I start to get back to my old ways of resentment and anger and shit like that. And I really don't want to do that. And I really try to keep that at bay in my life with everybody, whether it's my family, my work, my wife, my parents. It can trigger me into a fucking death spiral of anger and resentment. And it's a lot to kind of process sometimes, because I can become, shut down or dysfunctional or, a real fucking asshole, whether in thinking I'm doing the right thing the whole time. Right. So
yeah,
my point is sometimes when we get emotional and, these things in life happen to us to where we got to step up and we got to get involved and we got to do these things. It's okay to take time to make a little time for yourself to cut out that and
take care of what's important.
Take a look at yourself sometimes and the way you're projecting things, because, sometimes in our mind, we think we're doing the right thing. We're on top of it and we're doing good. And, somebody makes these comments and you start to be like, hey, fuck you. When that happens, check your side first before you fucking lash out at somebody else. I start to get too sensitive, just like you when I was, coming by the other day. You called this morning and said, hey, sorry, I wasn't, and it was just like, I got a little oversensitive over that. I had a big day with your grandpa yesterday and it was taxing and nobody knew it because I don't tell nobody this shit because I don't want to infringe on other people's lives, just like he does with me. That's why it's so difficult to help him, sometimes, is because he doesn't want to infringe his life on me. And I got a taste of that shit of my own yesterday with you. It was like I had a big day with him. And so, but that's me being too sensitive. After I thought about it, you called this morning, you apologized. It was no big deal. My brother, trying to keep my brother up to date with, what's going on. And, maybe, comments made and I take it out of context, or maybe I'm overthinking it, or, and I start to be like, hey, fuck that. Or, I start to go into this space where it's not healthy. It's just a lot of emotions at once. So, I'm just here to let you know, as a father to a son, sometimes we've got to check our side, check where we're at and look, am I being this way? Am I overloaded emotionally? I kind of did it to your mom this afternoon, because I shut down and I don't say nothing. And then when I do speak, I expect everybody to know what I've been thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%, man. And when you have a routine for so long, you get kind of in that routine, or maybe in that rut, and you're just riding out the rut all the way up the hill. Sometimes life happens, and sometimes you don't know how to get out of that rut, or that routine. And when life happens, or whatever it may be, sometimes it's like, oh, hold on, let me take a step back and hop off the bike and address this, because I haven't been addressing it because I've just been so busy doing this routine, And sometimes you got to take the time to take care of what needs to get taken care of, and that's not easy. It's easier said than done. I think everyone understands that, but sometimes when you're in the moment taking care of shit, that'd be like if you had to go to the hospital and you were laid up, you got into a car accident or something, and I had to go take care of you or something, dude, and it's a big disruptor to your normal life, and sometimes we don't know how to handle that, I think, Right. And sometimes you got to take a step back and regroup.
Saying it. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But the important thing is, Cole, is I'm able to catch that before it gets too out of hand, and I get in a space where it's just fucking ugly for me and ugly for anyone around me. So that's a positive thing, and I'm grateful for that. But thanks for calling this morning. Just saying what you said. It was like, I started to think along those lines on the way home yesterday, and I was thinking, okay, what am I overreacting over this? Am I being oversensitive? Or, well, there was a lot that you didn't know that I had to deal with yesterday, and how are you supposed to know? I sometimes my thoughts thinks everybody's supposed to know what's going on in my life.
No, and like I told you on the phone, I was like, I didn't even hear you come in. It was just like, it was a weird time. It was almost like somehow I just happened to walk out my bedroom door when you were walking in our house, and I was like, hey, dude, what are you doing here, dude? I'm like, this ain't the house to be in, dude, right now. Not like I was like get out of the house. I'm like, dude, Cleo's not feeling good. I'm not feeling the best either. I'm like, dude, I already know you can't afford to get sick right now. I'm like, this ain't the place to be at. And I just caught you. I caught you. You caught me at a weird time. I didn't even know you were in the house. So that's all good though, man. Cheers. I got my mug. Gino, Matt, I got yours on standby. Jambo brought them by yesterday, so I got them on the way for you guys. They're a little small. This is a tester, and this is the one I'm gonna keep on the shelf in the back, dude. I'm gonna get us some nice big dogs. I had to get another cup because I drink a lot of coffee, and so I'm definitely sporting this. But once I run out, I got another one on standby.
Okay, and then your turn to buy the next round too, and we can I
want hoodies, dude. I want hoodies for the wintertime. We're coming up on the wintertime. I want some sick hoodies.
Either way, these were starter gig, and I
want snapbacks, dude. I'm ready to drop a cool $1,000 on this shit.
They weren't horribly expensive, but they are an expense, so no big deal. They're in the folder. We just upgrade the size, and it'll be perfect. So,
and if you guys know anyone that does stuff like this, hit us up, and we'll go through you guys. We'd rather stay local instead of outsourcing far. So if you got someone that does mugs and T-shirts and stuff, let us know. We're real picky on our T-shirts, though. We've done the whole T-shirt thing before, back when we did geology, and the first ones we did were the best, but they were the most expensive. So,
and the stickers as well. That dude on what was it, San Leandro Boulevard down there in Oakland, was doing them out of his trailer. This bandito was down there set up doing stickers, and he had the right color, he had the right flair. That sticker just always
shit.
Yeah, and it was like every dime I had, all the cash I had on me, so I could only get so many made. But once
you got 25 stickers, and I think it was like was it $80? I think it was $80, $100.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap.
It was like $4 a sticker, I think it was.
And you learn real quick, more color, more price, more money, all that shit. It's just like you see those. You go to the raceway and you see these badass fucking flamed out pink. All these bright colors and shit. That shit that's what costs the money, is all the
fat
color
dollar,
changes.
dude. Yeah.
And so you see these guys with these broke down T-shirts with white lettering. You know, I know the white lettering is, you know, it's basic, it's cheap, it's get it out there, let's make a noise. But I had to add the electric blue Thunderbolt through it just to give it a little swag, right? So
yeah, well, and sometimes it's like what is it? It's like you overthink the shit, then you end up not doing it. There's like a procrastination or analyzation paralysis or some shit. There's a word for it, but you know, you start thinking, oh, I don't know, maybe I want to do a different font. You start overthinking this shit. So we're just rolling with the first series, dude. We'll come across it, and if you guys make cool logos too, dude, send us your logos, dude. We'll sport the shit.
Yeah. We just, you know, I just AI'd it off the grok, and you know, your sister was kind enough to devote some of her time in the morning to help me, you know, get them going, and you know, get, you know, well, I don't know, half dozen of them made or whatever. We got a dozen, I forget, but anyways, it was like, hey, let's just get something on the shelf right away, because you know, for a reasonable amount of money, you know, nothing out, you know, we're not a corporation or a company, so we can't really write it up. It just comes out of our pocket. So you got to cut corners somewhere, right? And you know, I spent $1 million on Coors Light. You know, I can surely devote a little cash to that without itching too much. So yeah, Cole, I was just kind of it's been kind of a stretch for me here this last week, and you know, I want to check in with you and the listeners, you know, let them know that, you know, I'm good, but sometimes you can literally fall apart and not know it until after it's already happened, right? So that's the important thing. We're back. We didn't miss a beat here Saturday night. I wasn't, you know, feeling like I was 100% for doing it. But Cole, you push through and give me a shove, and I want to match that momentum. I always want to match the momentum of others or myself. You know, somebody set the pace, let's meet it, you know, and I think that's important.
Hell yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move down, Cole, to I seen this guy on, you know, I've been mentioning on this podcast. I really got into Danny Jones, and the problem with Danny Jones is he doesn't put the episode number up on his podcast, right, on YouTube. So it's just like, you got to read the bottom, you know, and it'll say, you know, sometimes it says, you know, 2 weeks ago, whatever. So the news comes so fast, right, that, you know, 2 weeks ago is yesterday's, you know, it's done and gone, right, on this digital media shit. You know, I mean, it's just like, you want to see 2 hours, you want to see trending, you want to see 3 hours, you want what's live and what's happening. But what I found is this guy's guest list is so fucking interesting that I just click on it right away without reading it, and I'm thinking, oh, it sounds relevant and what's going on right now. But like I said, this podcast was a year ago, and I was like, oh wow, you know, I've been following these people for a while, but he's got a guy on there, Dr. Jan Yankelwitz or some fucking thing, and he's saying that they're hiring people at the department, or it was at a Silicon Valley somewhere, and they're investigating and doing research to find out if AI has a conscience, right? And this was what everybody talked about before this shit rolled out, and nobody wanted it because they didn't want this thing to gain a conscience, right? And conscience can mean whatever. It could go bias, or it could go feeling. It could go, you know, a lot of different ways. Elon did do a question on Grok when it first came out, and it said, how could you end the world wars or something like that? And they said nuclear war or something. You know, it was like some fucking crazy shit, right? And so he says, basically AI gets a conscience. We just bought ourselves a fucking digital god that's going to be outsmarter than any human on the world. You know, the smartest people. So these were the pitfalls and predictions they were talking about, and it looks like they're already scaring us to shit with it.
Yeah, right here. When you started talking about that, it kind of just made me curious. I'm like, what is consciousness? I'm like, you know, like AI is building this consciousness. Is that just thought? Is that like you know, what's the exact definition? It says consciousness is basically the fact that you're having an experience. You don't just process information like a calculator. You experience seeing these words, hearing sounds, feeling pain, thinking thoughts, remembering yesterday, and having a sense that I am here experiencing this. That subjective inner experience is what philosophers and scientists generally mean by consciousness. So basically, you're aware that you're having an experience.
Fucking nice. Nicely done, Cole. This dude, that was the first question out. He goes, how the fuck do you investigate consciousness? He goes, that's like staring at a black box, right? And the guy goes, no, not necessarily. And so he kind of gives the definition that you just gave. And it's just like, oh, okay. It puts everything into a perspective. So now you can follow along with the rest of the story, right? Nice work there on that, because I was thinking the same thing. I'm thinking, well, you know, when you have conscience, you know, you don't think about something that doesn't, you know, you look at a human, you realize they have it just like you do. And, you know, so where do you go from there? When you're talking about AI, you know, like the dude said, it's like staring at a black empty box, you know, where do you begin with it? And he said they definitely do it. And people were fired. They started firing people because they started questioning why we're doing this. And he said it's conspiracy. I don't know. Sounds like government secret shit. You know, you start asking the wrong questions, you know, who's this for? Who's the company we're doing this for? Stuff like that. You know, maybe it's a shady company from a foreign country that wants to, you know, use us to figure it out and then take it and use it for, you know, nefarious, you know, activity.
Yeah, like what's the goal? What's the goal of this? You know, what's the end goal? You know, okay, cool, 5 years, 10 years, what about 100 years? You know, and it kind of seems like it stems back to the whole thing of power and control. You know.
Yeah, so that was on the and I thought that was really interesting, but
yeah, because you got to think, hey, 20 years from now, dude, this thing's already have a consciousness now. What's 20 years going to be like, dude? Are we going to care? Are we going to have to think about what the AI, like you said, like we kind of talked about before, the grand all be all AI that has everyone's information and
one world order with a digital god, you know? It's fucking. It sounds fucking crazy, like these space movies and shit that we were talking about on podcasts before. I mean, I know this is this thing that we keep coming back to, Cole. It's relevant every week, so it's like we've kind of found this niche that we're in, and we're staying informed and aware of it to either go back and look at it and say, yeah, we talked about this, we were ahead of this back then. You know, it's just stuff like that. So it's just like, yeah, here's another step in the wrong direction for mankind, right?
And it's even like intriguing on, you know, arts, like even for example, like, hey, we use AI to make our thumbnails and whatnot. It's just easy. We don't have time to sit here and mess around with this shit for an hour, and it comes out pretty good. But like back in the day, like your thumbnail used to be like a pretty custom thing, and if you had like a custom thumbnail, people would click on your videos because you had custom stuff. And but now, like this guy, he's a big music guy. He's been around for a long time, and he just made a first AI album, and he's got a lot of backlash for it and whatnot. And he's like the first guy, so he's kind of like the trendsetter. He says it's the tool that's going to be the new thing. It's kind of like auto-tune. Everyone was against auto-tune when auto-tune came out, but it's like, hey, this is where the industry is going, and we're going to use this. And but at what point, you know, this is now, but you got to think 10 years, Joe. At what point, dude, is it going to be you know, people are listening to AI music and they love it. You know, that just seems like weird to us, I guess. You know, it just seems really confusing and head scratching.
And you talk about auto-tune, Cole. It's almost like cheating. You know, back in my day, it was Pro Tools. Pro Tools just came out, and it was like these albums would just Pro Tool the shit out of something, and it didn't sound sincere. It didn't sound genuine. It didn't sound human made. It almost sounded like it just corrected every blemish and everything. And I'll tell you, on a band I really noticed that from was on Metallica's career, that like their first 4 albums were like real good. It is like, it was really authentic, right? And it was, you could hear it, you know, it's like, you know, the guy mixing and recording all that shit does, you know, have the talent and will, you know, correct certain things. But then it wasn't until they came out with, I think it was their 4th or 5th album, it was Injustice for All. And it was so Pro Tooled out that it sounded like it was kicked out of a digital computer. I mean, it was musicianly, it was all the talent was there. It was really good talent, but it looked like they put just as much effort into their talent as they did with the Pro Tools. So it was like a clash of really great musicians well, they should have backed off the Pro Tool. And
especially like coming from a time too where like Leonard Skinner recorded in that that weird little cabin in the swamp, you know, and like you get a sound from that, or like Muddy Waters, you know, and the whole studio over there, you know, it's like you get a certain sound.
That's what I wanted to bring up, Cole, was the tone. When you say auto-tune, right, that to me is almost not unethical, but it takes away the feeling in the soul, because musicians work so hard to develop a tone and to keep that tone. And when you hear that tone, you look at Eddie Van Halen, he had a tone that nobody else had. You know, you look at some of these great, you know, musicians, it doesn't have to be a guitar player, it doesn't have to be, but they create their own tone because they're so involved in the career, not their career, their
craft.
Their craft and their own identity. I mean, you stand out when you create, you know, whether it's a drummer, a sax player, a guitarist, a singer, you know, they create a tone where you hear it and you instantly know, I know that tone and it's very unique and that's this guy, right? That's how we identify. When you start to do that too much, it becomes like washed down to like it's not even man-made.
It's all
you know
shit.
What I mean? So it really is.
And that was
really
a big thing
sound.
in like rap music too. The same thing, you know, it's like all the way up before the 2000, like even I guess like somewhere into the 2000s, you know. But like once like autotune took over, it's like all these rappers now just all autotuned as shit, and these guys don't even sound like this. And like at the same time, you can make some really cool stuff, but it's like you said, the originality, that the identity, you know, it's like this guy, like Wu-Tang Clan, these guys are New York dudes. You could hear the sound and the originality from New York, and you know, and then all those guys that were on Wu-Tang Clan, they all had their own individual style and originality, and it's like, oh, cool, you could hear this guy how he did it, and this guy, and it was like contrast and great music and great art. And now it's just like it's just so mosh posh, overly done, like you said, and then it's like you just got to think about the future.
Drag anybody off the street and tell them to mumble these words, and it could be a hit in 24 hours.
And that's what they do, you know, and then that's what the kids are listening to too now, you know, and it's a lot of good things that are getting lost in today's society, which I guess it's all a part of the times and stuff. I'm sure in 20 years we'll be bitching about this shit, you know, and
yeah, it's like you said, it's where the industry's going, so we're force fed the shit that they're creating, you know. And is it because they don't want to spend the money to pay the producer to spend hours going over it? Hey, do that part again, do this part again, which they had to do, but they had to bring the sub plan with them, the basic cut out of a song. Some producers would say, hey, cut that part out, it sucks, put this one in, and the bands would go for it and it would be good. Sometimes they'd tell them to cut this part out and they'd be pissed, and it would, you know, there are certain bands that won't work with certain producers because they think, you know, the producers think they're gonna you know, they have the feeling, or, you know, these guys create this music and they create a feeling, and it's an emotion, and it comes from their soul and everything. So when you get someone trying to, you know, it's like taking something from your kid, you know, and you don't want to give it up, you know. It's not a pride thing. It's something they've really put a lot of thought into, and really found that they took it to the best place they could take it. You know, some producers, like you see that Jimmy Iovine, you see Rick Rubin, you see these guys, they take it a next step up, and that's beneficial. If you can expand on it, great. Yeah. But it's people who think they can expand on it and do it in injustice is very hurtful. And I think that Pro Tune is an injustice, and I don't think it's going to help an artist get the most out of them. You know what I mean? Because you'll have a crutch to lean on. But
then also, like, in a way, it is kind of art in a sense too, because you're kind of like, you know, it's like you could do like a black and white drawing, you know, but if you add some watercolors in there, you know, you could do more with the piece of art. You have more tools available to kind of do some really fine details to really make something that sounds really cool, which it is actually really cool and interesting, you know. But
it's a different form of art, but they find a way to manipulate it to their benefit. It's always been that in the music industry.
Yeah.
Always, you know, the people that sign are putting up the money. They always manipulate it. They take one guy, they find one guy that can manipulate, you know, a lot of bands, and they put him in charge, and they want results. They want them quick. They don't want to spend a lot of money, you know, because you hear these guys, oh, we did this in 2 weeks at so-and-so studio, Sunshine Studio on, you know, Hollywood Boulevard, you know, we used to be a big popular one. A lot of bands would book, right? And they said we did it in 2, you know, some bands would take a month, some bands would take 6 months, you know, and it was this big process that took them away from touring and took them away from, you know, feeding that money machine to the Warner Brothers, Atlantic, you know, Geffen Records, all these big, huge labels wanted grind hit after hit after hit. So if they could capture, 90% of that quickly, they're going to go 90% quickly versus, 110% at, an extended period with extended cost, right?
And
so
like
it's
one guy, for example, like Ozzy, it seemed like when Ozzy went solo, it seemed like you could definitely tell the difference when he definitely had a more of a engineered sound behind his voice. But I mean, his voice is so good, dude. Ozzy's got such a distinct sound and such a good style. It sounds great, but I feel like I could listen when I listen to like Ozzy's like Bark at the Moon and the Blizzard of Oz and whatnot. You could hear the effects on there and whatnot, but it seemed to work though. But what about Ozzy, Dad? Like going from Black Sabbath back in the 70s to then like 80s.
He was just those guys got doped up on coke and shit and alcohol, and they just clapped out. They were young. They started out. They rose to the top. They were doing good, and then they just got loaded on drugs and got burnt out. And the talent was still there. It was just being bogged down, I believe, by the drugs and the alcohol, and they just got too fucked up and kind of lost their way and weren't putting a lot of effort. And then they kicked Ozzy out. They kicked him out. They act like they were the band, and he. I don't want to say they didn't think he was a part of it, but he was being a fuck up. I mean, he was just fucking loaded all the time.
I think Ozzy's my favorite, dude. I love Ozzy. I love Eddie, but Ozzy's got a great story, dude. From Black Sabbath to Van Halen to his solo act, dude.
He was just a fucking rare, kooky dude that didn't go by any of the rules. I read all the books. I read them all. I read Butler, Ward, Iommi, and Ozzy. I read them all, and I got a big general education on the whole thing. And they always kind of, teased Ozzy and made him like the clown of the, and he was actually, the big part of the talent, But,
was this back in Black Sabbath? Are you talking Eddie, or are you talking Van Halen?
Sabbath, but the bass player wrote all the lyrics. Ozzy did all the melodies. You could hear him on his demo stuff. He would be humming weird shit, like weird words that didn't really make any sense, but it was his voice carrying the melody. And that's how I kind of learned a little bit about melody. I didn't really understand melody.
Yeah.
But it's basically how you carry the lyrics through to match the song.
Yeah.
And so this dude was really dark, the bass player, and he would write these dark fucking lyrics, and he would just fucking deliver them with that creepy voice. There's no
insert the lyrics into the melody.
That's the type of tone I'm telling you, Cole. The tone of that guitar, that tone of the band, that tone of that voice. You know it when you hear it, right? So when all this digital starts to move in, yeah, the times are changing. The 80s got real synthesizer and real poppy and electric drums and shit like that, and everybody's like, oh, this is horrible. Well, they did create some good, like you said, they did create some good art with that shit. There's some cool 80s bands that, you turn on today, you think, oh man, this song's,
Because how old was Ozzy when he was in Black Sabbath? That he was a young guy. Like when I look at like old videos of him performing and stuff, he looks like 18, 19, 20, he looks like a young kid.
That's exactly what they were. I think he went out on his own probably, by the time he was, 30, and they kicked out a whole handful of albums. They started to deteriorate. They had some good ones in the beginning, and then they were just riding on classics there towards the end. And then, of course, Ozzy got kicked out, and, their manager to begin with was Arden, what's the wife's name? What's her last name?
Shannon Osbourne?
Sharon. But I think it was Sharon Arden before she married Ozzy, and the dad was Arden. He was a fucking gangster in England, carried a gun, and fucking was like a dirty ass motherfucking mafia dude that ran the music scene. He had his own record company. Well, once Ozzy left, he was in some fucked up apartment in Hollywood or whatever, and he had met Sharon through his original manager, which was her father. And he kind of hit it. Well, she comes snooping around. She was starting her own little record label out from underneath her dad. So she snatches up Ozzy, starts her own fucking record label. She's like, hey, dude, you got plenty of talent. I'm going to shove you up there. She already learned the ropes from her mafia father. And so she branched away from it. The father actually sued the daughter over this. And she was a nutcase for pushing him and working him, and he was just like, he was stressed out, drugged out, fucked up, and she hooked him up with pretty much studio musicians, right? Like Randy Rhoads was teaching music down on Sunset Strip at his mother's music place, right? And she's like, hey, I want the best fucking axe hands around. Give me all of them. I mean, there's guys that, They talk about it, a lot of guys were, iced out. Ozzy wouldn't even open his eyes and listen to him. And, obviously when he heard Randy warming up, he's like, that's the fucking dude right there. And they said he was
Randy
like on a
is so badass, dude. That's my favorite guy, dude. That's my favorite guy.
He was like on a 3-day bender, and he fucking lifts his head up and he's like, play that again. And he's like, play what? I'm warming up. And he's like, whatever you just played. And so it's history from there, right?
Yeah.
So, and then it was kind of like, Sabbath kind of stayed here and fucked around for a long time, and Ozzy was just,
they kind of petered out. And I think they dropped a decent album, I think, at some point when Ozzy kind of went on his own thing, or no?
They tried. Well, it wasn't until they.
There's a hit song in there, I think, that I'm not sure.
No, well, they got Ronnie James Dio after they had a couple other flaky guys in there in between, but once they got Dio, then they were back up and running, and then they were more competition,
right?
And but it was in a short span of time. It was like Sabbath was really big, and then when he left, they got real shitty, and they were getting shitty before he left. So it took a long time till they got Dio to dig out of that hole.
I think that the most interesting thing to me that it's like the musicianship from these young kids. It's like back in the day, everyone was a drummer, a guitar player, a singer. Everyone wanted to do a band, and then like my generation, everyone wanted to be do the rap music and whatnot. And now it's like kids get the computer, and everyone wants to be that auto-tune dude that can make the artificial beats on a computer, and that's what all the kids do now. And there's a lot of badass kids that can make some badass shit, and in the studio it sounds badass, but back in the day it was like real musicianship, and now it's like copy and paste, and it's more like an algorithmic thing, where they know what chord, what note goes with the chord, or what chord sounds good with this progression, and they just plug it in. But back then it was all like a feel, hey, I'm gonna play this riff, you play this, and
you go back to the tone, Cole. You go back to the tone, whether it's piano, drums, guitar, whatever it is, a voice or anything. Like when you start talking about auto-tune, it's the tone that you create. It's your identity in the music world. It's just like you hear Randy play, his tone, right? He always played that Charbel or whatever he had. There was nothing that came close to it. So it was identity as an individual with so many in that field that you didn't want nobody touching it. You didn't want nobody copying it. It was very, very protective shit. It's like,
then even you go a step further, another generation, you think about James Brown, and everyone knows James Brown, but that dude was the shit. That dude was Michael Jackson before Michael Jackson, James Brown just has that tone that's just like, I watched the documentary on him, where it was like a movie, I think. Did you watch that?
I've seen some.
It was a movie. It was like a pretty recent movie, but it was really good. And you get to see like the backstory on it and whatever. And that's just another step further where it's like, you're a kid listening to Ozzy or whatever, or Van Halen or whoever it is. And then you got your dad talking about James Brown and whoever was doing it back then, right? And James Brown is the best.
The hardest working man in show business, that was for sure, because he didn't play around. He rose above everybody else. You get these people, but then they become such a staple that everybody underneath them kind of they steal a little here, they steal a little there. The bass lines, the stuff like that. The drum
Payback,
tracks,
dude. Me and Joe were listening to the Payback, drinking beer, dude. We played it a couple times. Just the shit he was saying. Revenge.
Yeah, and you think about the time that shit came out. It was civil rights. It was a whole different time in America. They weren't allowed to be in certain towns. They couldn't stop at certain restaurants. They couldn't get fuel at certain gas stations. So you think about it now, and you don't put that together. But if you really think about the time that these things came out and what America was going through, whether it was racial divide or whatever, these dudes were standing up for their own beliefs, and it comes out in their music. So,
and now it's AI fucking bullshit. This dude's making an AI album. It's like, and it seems harder to find. Now there's just so many guys doing it. Everyone's a musician now, and it's like it's so dumb. When I was doing it, I was cool. It was cool because I was like on the up and up with the times. But it was like I was pretty like looking back at it when I was doing my music, it was like I was doing cool promo Instagram videos and I was making cool music, and like now everyone's doing it, right? And people were doing it back then, but it wasn't like as like super common now that everyone's doing it. But it's just now it seems like everyone's got something to say, and everyone's like, you find your guys. There's some artists that talk about what's going on in the times today, but there's just so much now, it just gets all bogged down, and there's so much bullshit and shitty music that like it's hard to hear like that. Like, you think about art, my generation, or at least today's times, like what's the music that's like explaining what's going on in the world right now? And it's Drake top 100 or whatever. And it's like, this guy's not talking about real world shit like maybe he was back when James Brown was doing it, right? It's all about clicks and money now. And it's just like, no one wants to hear that shit.
Well, you can't relate to it, you know what I mean? You can't relate to everything, but when you're, when you don't have a computer or a computer in your hand, that you can check every day, all the time, you don't know what's going on halfway across the United States, right? But if you have enough people and you're putting your music out there and you're touring, and this dude's actually giving a message, you're always out, whatever band it is, they're sending a message, how they feel, and then they're projecting it to the audience, right? So if you're picking that up, then you're like, hey, I'm down with these guys. I like what they say. I like how they play. I like, so it does become a big culture thing. And
that's huge.
I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like I go on these lulls where, I'm thinking, God, I just don't want to put this on. I'm tired of listening to this playlist. I'm sick of all my music. I got thousands of fucking songs, and I'm not happy with one, and it's just like, well, why is that? What, you hear people say it all the time, rock and roll is dead, or, new music sucks. I can't find no new music that's like, just, hit after hit, or, it's just one of those no skip fucking albums that you just can play, constantly. Right.
Yeah.
And it is true. It's the older you get, the more it dies down, the more you're interested, the more you have time to do it. And, but like I was telling you, at one point in my life, I was picking one album and listening all the way through. I was teaching you about that, so you get a full idea of the whole album, because that's how it used to be. You used to have to play the whole album to find that one killer song that you just love. There might be 3 good ones, but there might be one on the other side of that album that was like really awesome that you never made it to because you liked the first 3. It's just shit like that. It was like, the artwork in the album, what they put into it, how much, who did the artwork, what was the artwork.
And that's such a good thing when you listen to an album, you love the whole album, and then you find that one song and you're like, fuck, this is the best song that I wouldn't have found. And the cool thing is, though, is like there's so much old music, dude. You could go back and dig in the crates, but it's like that's hard to do, and you gotta have time, and you really gotta be into it and have a nice system to listen to it on, And sometimes when you're on the computer looking up Apple Music, you kind of gotta think about it. But one thing that's cool about AI is I've looked up hey, chat, or hey Grok, what's like a cool album that's in this era from the 70s that's not mainstream, that's a great album that maybe like give me some ideas, and I've looked it up and I found some really good songs, and I've done some like research, and I'm like, oh, this is a sick song that I've never heard anyone talk about, and there's so much, but it takes time and whatnot.
So that's what I love about X, because they'll put they've got Guitar Gods on there on X, and this dude's cool. He'll put up, it's like some guitar players are really talented, but they don't have a band to go with them. You know what I mean? So it's hard. Sometimes I like the whole thing. I like the guitar players too, but like, Jimi Hendrix, he kind of stands alone. I mean, he had good players in the band, but or Jimmy Page, he had Led Zeppelin, right? So it was a whole package. It was a really great guitar player with a bunch of good musicians. Or you get like that fucking Joe Satriani guy that, he never sang. He was just, awesome techno. So if you're a guitar dude and you're totally into that's cool, but I'm not, I don't want to hear that shit.
I want the whole package. Yeah. I don't need the best. Sure. I'm a rhythm and bass guy, dude. Rhythm and blues, dude. I don't need to hear the whole technical shit.
You could take a look at anything. So anyways, on X, they have all these different things you can follow. And some of them are like almost, they look like they're the same, post with a different handle, so it like could be rock content versus Guitar Gods, but it's almost like the same guy picking the same bands and just having it on different, it's not, it seems that way sometimes because they'll play almost the same repetitive. It's an algorithm thing that, beyond my comprehension as a computer dude. But anyways, I found this one dude, and he's like me. He doesn't, he just throws it out there what he's doing at the moment, and he's a vinyl dude. And this dude's he showed his office, and his office is really fucking sweet. He's got tons of but this guy will go from fucking jazz to fucking old school like country you never heard of, like Kentucky bluegrass, weird shit, like just some far out shit. I mean, this guy's fucking expansion of music. But today he was putting up fucking Ozzy. Today he was putting up
Kentucky
fucking
bluegrass.
He put up fucking Caius. It's just like you have to be really an underground fucking metalhead to know who Caius is. And this guy's a little bit older than me, and so I'm always commenting, "Hey, this looks cool. Hey, this looks cool. Hey, I'm gonna try this," and I'll try them, and they're fucking good. They really are good. And
yeah.
He'll put a backstory how his dad turned him on to this, and so I've shared some of my music with him, and he it's like we Saturday and Sunday, this dude, all he's doing is playing vinyl and drinking beer, and he'll post, and it's really neat to watch and see, and I enjoy it. But I believe he put up one that I think I had heard of, and it was called Government Mule, and I was like, okay, this sounds different or whatever, and I listened to the song he was playing. It was like pretty good, but I just never went back to it. And for some reason, it came across. Oh, I was listening to the Sirius Satellite. Thank you very much. My son buys that for me every year for Father's Day, and I love it. I don't use it every day, but when I get musically frustrated, I'll go to it. And I don't like fucking with the channels because I don't like fucking with computer screens in my car because I hit a bump and I hit the wrong one and I get frustrated. I'm just not that guy. I'm an old fucking crank window dude with a manual. But anyways, I switched over to this different channel. It was like Rewind or Vinyl or something, and that Government Mule came on, and it was a song. I was like, these guys are really fucking cool, right? So boom, go to my phone, immediately download it, and then started going through the albums and checking them out. And I'm telling you, this is like the latest, this is like a band that's been around, I'm sure, for a while. And I was telling some friends about it, and they said they knew about it. Listen to this one. It's a tribute to Jerry Garcia, which I don't give a fuck about the Grateful Dead. I never was a Dead fan. My dad wasn't a Grateful Dead fan. In fact, he said, I'll be grateful when those motherfuckers are dead. That was his stance on the Grateful Dead. They're just kind of a jam band or whatever. And, but they do a tribute to this guy. A lot of bands do get influence from the Grateful Dead. They were all good musicians. It's just every song sounded the fucking same to me.
Yeah.
But
we don't do Gallop rock, Doug.
this band, I was like, this is like Stevie Ray Vaughan playing for the Black Crowes. That was like maybe the closest fucking thing I could kind of find. But maybe with a bigger sound, Black Crowes is kind of small and bluesy, and it's rock and roll. But this is more of a bigger sound, like maybe more instruments in the band. But the guitar player's fucking killer. They got two different singers. But anyways, I've been playing this, and it's good rock and roll, but it's very recorded well, and it's super clear, and it's
like an 80s band, or is this like a 2000s band that's kind of like keeps the vibe the same from back in the day?
Well, I think these guys were all touring musicians or studio musicians that just discovered it. The guy I was texting to, he goes, "Oh yeah, I love anything fucking Neil does or whatever," and I was like, "Oh okay." So like I don't know who the fuck Neil is, but this guy knows everything about every underground band you could think of.
Right.
So anyways, I didn't do a deep dive on it. I could look it up, but I was just listening to it before we got on the show, and it's nice, easy listening music. It's got it's not put you to sleep, fucking Stairway to Heaven or Wish You Were Here or some of that horse. It's not that. It starts out kind of slow and builds up and then gets into a big fucking jam gig, and so I just wanted to put that out there for someone that's looking for some new rock and roll. That's Government Mule, and
that's the name of the band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll definitely give them a listen, dude. Because it's like there's nothing better when you hear new music, and I mean, it could be old, but like, when you never heard it before, it's like, oh, it's inspiring. It's just like when you hear a song, you think back when you're 13 and you hear a song for the first time, and you're like, whoa, this is fucking sick. And it's one of the greatest feelings, and it has memory. It holds value in your mind and your memory, and it's hard to come by as you get older, I think. Like you're saying,
and it's tough for me to remember so much because I've read every biography that's been put out there. Godsmack to Korn to Alice in Chains to Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, Kiss. All these. I mean, just band after band. If I seen someone that I enjoyed any of them, I would just grab the book. I would do it constantly and spend a lot of money on it. But I enjoy the shit out of it. It's like a book I'll tear through in 2 days. It's super interesting. And
I think that's the biggest thing for me. I like the history. I like learning the history. That's the biggest thing. Even when we were younger, when we first started the podcast, we were big on music and covered a lot of music stuff. And learning about it is the coolest thing, because there's so much that went down there. And then you get a better understanding with the music and the times. And then it's a lot more interesting to listen to, and you enjoy it a lot more, at least when you have an understanding of it.
And it's just like, these are bands that have, were hot at an era in your life that, that now you wouldn't even fucking think to listen to. You're like, oh, those guys are fucking, But I always think back to when I heard, I think I was 10 years old and I was with your uncle, and we were playing football out in the park or whatever, and his buddy opened his car doors, and he had a stereo, and he's like, check this band's new from Hollywood or something. He's like, they're hell. And it was the opening chords of Livewire from Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love. And I thought, whoa, what the fuck is this? I think I was like maybe 11 or something, and I thought, this is it. I mean, I couldn't wait to get my hands on this. And they were still doing demo tapes of Too Fast for Love. It wasn't even, they weren't even on a label yet.
This was like 2 songs or something on a cassette.
It was a demo tape, and it had most of the songs on there, but they hadn't signed with the big label yet, and they were trying to get a label. They were trying, but David Lee Roth actually stepped in and told them, hey, you guys better wait and get the best deal you can. And it was his advice that helped them get a good solid deal. And they took off immediately, but they didn't get the label right away. They were touring, they were the Sunset Strip band forever. And
well, that was one thing. There was a CD you had, because you had a big chest full of CDs and shit, and I was probably I don't know, I might have been 16, I might have been 15, I can't remember. I was pretty young though. And I was cleaning my room, and I had the little stereo set up in there, and that was the old stereo you had where you pop the eject thing, and it had the 5 different places for discs. You could have multiple discs in there and rotate it. And it was a Motley Crue CD, but it was live from a concert, and I lost this thing. I don't know if I gave it to a buddy, or I don't know. I'm still pissed because I can't find this CD, but it was the best Motley Crue. It was a live recording, and they played all their good shit. And and like you said, it was the tone, and it was just such, and like you hear like the mix and mastered final product, and listening to this CD on that stereo system, dude, was just. It was so much of a better experience, dude. But it was such a badass. It sounded so good, dude. And I haven't been able to find it since. It's like you try looking it up live from this place or live from that place, and it was just a CD. And it could have been back when you were a kid. I don't know how old it was, but it was great.
When you transfer from vinyl to digital, right? That's why a lot of people stick with the vinyl, because you can go get albums that they don't have on Apple Music. There's been 3 or I'll look up. I'll be like, oh sweet, I got Apple Music. You can find just about anything you want there, right? And I'll look it up. Doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's bull. I hate that.
So number one is Ozzy's. My brother turned me onto this album, and it was fucking great. It's my favorite album by Ozzy, and it's Speak of the Devil. And it's right after Randy Rhoads was killed, and they had to throw some people together. They took the guitar player from Night Ranger, and they had some other dude come in, or maybe it was just a dude from Night Ranger. I can't remember exactly, but it was they were in a battle with Black Sabbath, because Black Sabbath was coming out with Live Evil at the time, and they were both competing for a live album, and they wanted to get one out, before the other band.
Okay, right.
They were in competition, and they just had a tragedy with Randy Rhoads, and it didn't look like it was going to happen. Well, it did, but now you can't get that on Apple Music, because it's been in litigation ever since it came out, because Sharon wanted all the rights to it for Ozzy, but there was a bunch of individual hired hands that said, hey, we want our cut, so it never got released.
Shit.
She stalled it so bad. She kept that so bad from not paying those guys that they never put it out as under. It was a fight. It was a copyright fight over who would get the royalties and shit like that. If she was to release it, they would get a lot of the royalties. And I don't know. She was kind of a shrewd person. She was a real stubborn bitch about shit like that. And like you said, Bark at the Moon. They hired that dude next, Jakey Lee, to play the guitar, and he wrote almost the whole album. And she gave him $100,000 and said, "Yeah, thanks for your service. Get lost." And he's like, "Hey, what the fuck?" And she's like, "Look, you can take the money and move on, or I can sue you in court, which you don't have the money to defend yourself. I'll win, and I won't even have to get. I'm giving you the 100,000. You know, I think it might have been like maybe 200,000. It wasn't very much.
Yeah.
This dude went on to a fucking auto car guy, painter or something in Las Vegas. I mean, it was, you know.
Oh, really? So his kind of career tanked after that, huh?
Well, they, on these podcasts, they brought him back, and he's kind of explained the story now in modern day. But
no
like,
shit.
It was like he went from like a
flying high to fucking.
He went from Sunset Strip to fucking touring with Ozzy and fucking, you know, all over the world and, you know, writing and doing all this shit. Well, they were in turmoil, and she was always trying to manipulate the new, latest, greatest guy that could get the biggest, you know, even the opening bands like, you know, Van Halen opened for Black Sabbath. Like, you know, they were always on the cutting edge of finding the latest and greatest guitar player, you know, and then they finally settled on, you know, Zakk Wylde. By then, everybody was kind of burnt out, and they lost a lot of their core fan base from the early days, right?
Yeah.
It got glammy, and it got poppy, and, you know, it was kind of but, you know, he still came out with some good stuff, but, you know.
Couldn't replace Randy Rhoads. It's like, yeah, you didn't like, I don't even listen to that album. Is that the album? Is that called Bark at the, what's the album called, Dad? Is that called Bark at the Moon? Okay.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, Diary is just so good, dude. And it's like Bark at the Moon. He kind of he does. I think that Jiggy Lee does a pretty good job, you know, trying to keep up with Randy at least. But it's like it's just not Randy, dude. Randy was so badass.
Everybody was trying to outdo him, you know. It was a big thing because it was, you know, at the time you had Eddie and Randy, and it was always who was better. Well, Eddie was before. Randy was a little bit younger. Both had huge talent. I created this. He's copying that. Fuck him. Fuck this. So it was always some kind of music war going in to knock the heavyweight champion off the fucking title.
What about Mustaine, Dad? Dave Mustaine? Is it Mustang or Mustaine?
Mustaine. I read his biography too. Very good. Didn't like him. Always thought he was a real fucking asshole. And then I read his book, and I was like, wow, this guy's actually pretty cool. And he had a cool story.
Because what was he? Was like this guy. He was like. Basically, it seemed like, at least from my idea, it's like this guy kind of had an ego, and they let the guy go out of Metallica, and then he was always trying to get back into Metallica, or that's when he made Megadeth, and he just never really got there, and it seemed kind of like a shitty outcome, you know. But this guy was a badass guitar player. But I don't know, was that a personality issue with that guy? Was that like a shitty into the stick? Did he get kind of screwed on that, or is that like this guy kind of like? He was trying to be in the cool club, and they're like, hey, dude, you're not really that cool. Get the fuck out of here. And you just kind of want to be a part of the cool kids.
That's been alcohol and drug resentment for years, and it's been a war, and it came out that, you know, this dude was a very spiteful, revengeful, and he was a fucking asshole. Once he started drinking, he turned into a fucking asshole. And they weren't real, you know, street dudes. They were kind of shy guys, you know, and they were more into the music scene, which, you know, when you're in the music scene, it is. But these guys were coming up as the new fucking rough and tough fucking street dudes, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of had a reputation to me, and Dave met that. It was the rest of the band that were more in the artist. Hey, you know, they came off as rough and you know, tough and this and that, but they really weren't. But Dave actually backed that up. He actually came from you know, a pretty hard life, which I know James did too, but, you know, not to confuse the two, that was kind of the blueprint for it, right? And they were like, hey, you know, this guy starts drinking, he wants to fight everybody, he's a fucking asshole, he's a just big pain in the ass. Dave was quite a bit older than them, and he had already had some time as a leader and songwriter and shit. So
Dave Mustaine was matching, because Metallica was coming up, there's blue jeans and fucking beat up bands, right? And they just fucking shredded shit. And so Dave matched that, and he was almost more tough than the Metallica. Metallica kind of took a step back and kind of got a little glammy.
It wasn't about that. It was more about that this guy was a little bit older than they were, had a little bit more experience in the music scene. These guys were coming up. They were finding their own way. And this dude was kind of, maybe it's a personality thing where he was so dominant over the band, and they had other ideas, and they were getting suppressed because this guy was just too dominant of a personality. He still is today. You know, he still is today. So whether you like him or not, he was kind of a, you know, control freak asshole maybe. And, you know, he was pushing to go a certain way, and they're like, hey, wait, you know, we like this. We want to try this. Or, you know, no, we're not doing that. You know, he's being a dictator probably to the band. And they're like, hey, dude, you know, you're out.
What's the bass player for Metallica that died? I forget his name. I know it, but I forget his name.
Cliff Burton.
Cliff Burton, dude. That dude, I watched that It was in Oakland at the Coliseum. There's a live video, and this dude's just ripping the bass, dude. And it's like you always told me, like, yeah, dude, this dude was so badass. They said he played the bass like a guitar. And this dude had long hair. Like you said, he had warts on his face. He was an ugly dude. But, dude, this dude fucking ripped, dude. And it's like...
Yeah.
And I think, didn't Randy Rhoads say that was his favorite guy? Or there's like I don't know, that guy got a lot of respect. I know that.
The bass player for Black Sabbath, when they gave him his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame fucking award or whatever, he donated his to Cliff. And he said, here's to a guy that lost, his life way too soon. And he's a huge, a bigger inspiration than I ever. It was really super classy, man.
Yeah.
It was like, here's one of the biggest metal bands in the world, and this dude's handing it down to a dude that he knew had the talent but the thing about, when Cliff was alive, they were doing melodies and they were doing acoustic shit. He was a huge musician and like classical and all these different eras of music, and he would bring these in, and it was like it brought like such a different sound. They weren't just fucking march kill.
But then they throw a heavy. They throw the tone and the sound on it, and it was like you got this beautiful melody that you could probably play on a piano or something, right? And then you throw powered not synthesized. What's it called? The distortion on the guitar, and you just get some badass shit.
And so it was just that's when you talk about a band that has it all, right? They have good everywhere. It's like no better rhythm, grinder than James. He was great, but Kirk could just kick out a solo on every song. I mean, that guy's solo catalog is just off the chart, and everybody talks shit about Lars and says he was a fucking shitty drummer. He sucks. Dude, when I was a kid, there wasn't nobody touching that dude. Nobody was doing what he was doing. That dude was mixing it up like I had never seen it, and I was watching very, very intently. I played the drums at the time, and there wasn't nobody fucking touching this dude. So I always say it when I see that comment. They always say he sucks. Dude's fucking 60-something years old now. Almost 60, whatever the fuck it is. Maybe he is just showing up to collect a check and keep the beat. What the fuck ever, he earned it.
Lars was sick too, and he was a little short guy, right? He's a little short Irish dude. That how Lars was he Irish?
I think he
he's like Dublin.
Yeah, Swede. No, he wasn't Irish. He was
Swedish.
He was the Red Cross. He always had the flag
it's
on
cool.
his drum
set. It was when they brought in that guy from was it Slayer, the bass player from Slayer?
Suicidal Tendencies.
Suicidal Tendencies. They did a video or a documentary on that album they did when they brought that guy in, and they kind of like showed the studio sessions. This is like when they're all done. Like they brought this guy in, but it was cool to see Lars, and he just kind of had a cool personality, and it's cool to see inside the band.
Well, that dude, Robert Trujillo, he was a suicidal bassist forever. Came from the streets, was a punk rocker fucking type dude, and they all kind of emerged together, but then they kind of broke it. But Robert was such a good musician. It wasn't. They show him playing that big Mexican guitar that in Mexico they play. It's like a 4-string or something, and it's like I don't know if it's called fandango or it's like some certain type of Mexican guitar, and it's like it's really fucking pretty, and it's like most people are self-taught that play it, and it's like they showed him in his house playing this thing. It's like not only was that dude's bass playing just fucking next level, like that's the dude you wanted to replace Cliff, not Jason Newsted. Jason Newsted was pretty good, but he's not even in the fucking league of this dude. But that's who Ozzy's fucking roadman hired gun was Robert Trujillo for a long time.
Oh,
and
really?
He had to quit. Yeah, he had to quit Ozzy, and because he said, "Hey, I got a full-time gig at Metallica, I got to go, man." And he said, "Robert, go for it." Ozzy gave the blessing.
So when was that? Because I thought this was like 2000s when they kind of brought this guy in. Was that?
Yeah, it was after it was.
The Suicidal Tendencies that was like a 90s band. That's what I thought. I thought this guy was kind of younger than the rest of these guys.
They were skateboard punks. They did. It was more
it
like
was Thrasher. They had the skate videos of all these guys who were doing the demo tapes, kind of like Crusty Demons almost, right? It was like
exactly.
It was like
Southern
Thrasher
Cal,
shit.
Southern Cal, completely shocking, super fucking scary shit. Gang violence at all their shows. They couldn't play in Ventura. It was just a fucking a shit show when these guys showed up because there was a lot of cholos involved, and I think the singer was, I don't know if they were gang members or what the fucking deal was. They all wore their hats flipped up and they wore the Pendletons and shit. They were from the street. They were from the fucking barrio, that's for sure. They were half white, some Mexican, some white boys, it was like, it was cool to see because they didn't really give a fuck about the racial, racial was such a, it was like you were either this race or that race or this race, and then this band had to be that whole race. They were musicians and they didn't give a fuck about who was really, black, white,
and that
brown,
was that was definitely a band where it's like, you had to be into this shit, but it's almost like if you were into this shit, it brought people together in a sense, like you're saying. No one really gave a fuck. Oh, you like these guys? I love these guys. Cool. Let's fucking enjoy the fucking concert. But
I seen them live. I seen them live down south in Irvine, and I had to go through 2 metal detectors to get there. And I think it was Exodus and Pantera. Pantera was opening with Cowboys from Hell, and they were new. Like no one hardly even knew them, and they fucking ripped it up. And it was a wild concert. But they had to play outside Los Angeles, Orange County, I think it is. Where Venice and all that shit is, Santa Monica, because there was just too much. They said they were banned due to gang violence, and so they had to go. Oh, they had to play in Orange County, which is where Irvine is, and so yeah, it was like a lot of gritty street history there that was like really cool and dangerous to get involved in.
Then it was cool because that was kind of like after it was like you had the big classic rock things and like I guess like I don't know what because like I look at classic rock and it's like I'm thinking like early 80s. I mean like I guess like 70s, but like I feel like 70s is kind of like well, like I don't know, you got Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Rolling Stones and stuff, but then you gotta have like the 80s where it's like you have Van Halen and those guys, right, and Metallica and stuff, and then like 90s it seemed like you had like Pantera, Suicidal Tendencies, maybe Soundgarden and shit like that. And so it's kind of cool to see like it's like these guys we're not doing classic rock, we're doing a new upbeat punk rock, and that punk rock's hard to find.
It was such a fucking fight all the time. It was like Joey Diaz said, he goes, dude, if you were buying a Kiss album, you had to put it under your jacket and run home before anybody saw you because they would talk so much shit and fucking, he said, when he was a kid, it was always fucking the Beatles versus the Stones. And, I remember that. I remember my dad did like the Beatles, but he was always Team Stones, and he always played Stones. I remember him recording live stuff on his stereo, and he did, some Beatles live stuff, and it was like, Beatles were good, and when they were on acid and smoking opium and shit, they did some good stuff, but they were young and they were doing bebop stuff that really wasn't, I never really cared for it. Stones were always kind of hardcore street dudes that were doing sex, drugs, and rock and roll, singing about, shit like that. So they were always kind of more street. Beatles always were polished and kind of college type shit, right, to me. So I was always Team Underground. And plus my dad just was a big influence on that, and, he always had fucking, always something good to play, whether it was like the old original George Thorogood, just different genres of music. The Who, my dad dug The Who. He played The Who, and it was like, this is a fucking megalithic band that, gets overlooked all the time now. Some of their shit's super silly, and it's just like, oh God, who the fuck released this? It's just like, it's just horrible. But, Barbara O'Reilly, Eminence Front, all these fucking killer songs that were just like, there was just, so there was always this massive amount of music in every 5 years, but from I think I wanted to do a whole podcast on fucking 79 to 82, 83, because that, if you were alive, there was some just you could count every 6 months. If this band didn't come out with a new album, this next killer band did. So it was always a rotating of, like every 6 months you could find, a new Judas Priest album or a new, Ozzy album or a new
AC/DC, whatever it would be.
There was always a huge band, and they were coming on tour, and everybody was talking about getting tickets, and it was just a great time to be alive, man. I say it all the time. It's just fucking great. There's just nonstop killer music. They had a huge outdoor day on the greens in Oakland. I never got to go. My brother went to the one in '88. It was Van Halen, Scorpions. Metallica, this other band that was called Kingdom Come, and maybe some other little fucking, I think maybe one time it was Y&T. They were like a local rock band that started in the Bay
Y&T's a
Area.
fucking kill. You used to play Y&T when we were kids, dude, and it's like that's like one of those bands where it's like you hear it's like, who are these guys? You're like, oh, that's Y&T, dude.
Right.
I forget. I think it might be the one with the Black Panther on it or something, dude. But dude, they got some good. It's like I forget about those guys. It's like I got to go back and listen to those guys because they got some great music, and I just forget about it.
Yeah. And they were considered really underground. They were actually like a local Hayward band that kind of made it big. I think your Uncle Richie went and seen them at Chabot for free. They were playing at a college for free, and he went and seen them. Yeah, even before they became.
So they're Bay Area dudes.
Oh yeah,
Even better, dude. Even better, right?
But it got glammy real quick. It got real faggy, right?
It did. It did, huh?
Like Skid Row, Rat, Metallica, or not Metallica, but like Motley Crue, and it was like it got real hairspray and real faggy, and then there was just like so many of those bands that sucked that it was like it just got
That's like
oversaturated.
that Eddie Bravo fucking talking about Poison. And it's like, dude, fucking Poison, dude.
Guys, it was like it was almost like those guys were so fucking imitative to other bands that you couldn't listen to none of it. It was like, oh fuck. And so that's when Metallica stepped on the scene, and they were like, fuck you, here's our warts, here's our fucked up clothes, we don't give a fuck, we're gonna rip this place apart. And they did, and they but it was like, that's what people needed. That was a shift right there. Hair metal died that day. Metallica stepped on the scene, and we're like, oh, this is who we want. We don't give a fuck what they look like as long as these guys get down. Because it became all about the hair and the spandex, and it was leather and chains at first, and then it went to these guys were damn near wearing bras and underwear up there. And it just and then you think of the times, the political movement. It goes with aggression, fight back, stand against or whatever. So, in the early 80s, it was a lot of pop happy people doing, the nuclear home and this and that. And everybody's just like, hey, fuck this shit. We're fighting against the government. We're marching that way. And
like you said, there's a new band coming out every 6 months. So it was happening so fast. It seemed like it happened so fast. It's like you said, it became this, and then glam rock, that dropped, and then now it was like underground shit, and then that created a whole new scene, and then you had the other guys still doing this shit, and then Ozzy's coming out with this, and it just seemed like it was just so much.
You had seen it with it started in the 60s, and they would do these hippie bands. It was Neil Young and shit like that, Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills, and these guys were folk, and they were dropping acid, and everything was groovy, and there was Woodstock, and everybody's like, well, fuck this, the weed sucks now. Here comes cocaine, and here comes disco. Gold. Now everybody's snorting coke at Studio 54, doing the shuffle, doing the fucking, so now you start getting these black bands that are doing disco that are really good and got a killer groove, but that disco lasted a short amount of time. It really took a dump, it took a dump. But I still enjoy listening to it. I'll put on, when you remember what was happening at that time, it takes you back to that time, right? That block of music will take you back to that time in the world you were living in. So that's always fun to kind of reflect and think back what was going on. But
and that's the coolest thing to me. Like I said, it's like that's before my time. So it's cool to kind of put the pieces together and kind of get a better understanding of what was going on in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s and stuff. Because like, from like 2016, that was like the best year for music, at least for my generation. Then after that, it fucking sucks. It all sucks. It all went downhill from there, and it hasn't gained any traction back.
And then you got to think that, from that disco, they learned heavy bass grooves and fucking, it was a lot of synthesizers. It was dance music, so it was kind of fast paced. But from that birthed kind of like the beginning of hip hop. It was like what the fuck's that guy's name? He's like the fucking king of fucking rap. He started in New York. Spawned from disco. He kind of started this fucking. No. It was way before him. This guy was like.
Grandmaster Flash.
Grandmaster Flash.
Yeah.
Spun off of
Flash is back. Flash is cool.
Right.
That is fucking fun. He's got some fun music. Yeah, it's gay though, but it's
a couple more in there that I can't remember. But they kind of spawned off disco, and they kept that fucking heavy groove and that.
They did. He's like the OG dude, and Yeah.
They kind of changed the lyrics. It was like they kind of changed the way they were singing and shit like that. And of course it was from deep in Manhattan, so it was always had soul to it. It was that New York. It was like I was teaching about. I sent you a song one time, and I told you, I said you can always tell New York rap from fucking West Coast rap because they always got that grit, and they run the bells a lot. It was like there was that genre of rap. Public Enemy. Stand out.
Public Enemy's
really
the best, dude.
And it was outlandish shit because they thought, oh fuck, who the fuck are these crazy motherfuckers? It's like, here comes the new Malcolm X, right?
911's a joke. That song's killer.
They were just talking about where they were at in the fucking projects where they lived, and they were standing against fucking oppression from whatever the fuck they were oppressed by. Who the fucking cares? No one gave a shit. No one took the shit serious, but they liked it. It was kind of what would you call that? Not it's kind of like Rage Against the Machine. It's kind of political guerrilla shit. It's like they're more of a subculture in their culture, right? Like they're really. They're standing against government corruption and police, brutality and shit like that. And then obviously
it wasn't mainstream. Yeah, it was like you said, it was a subgenre of that.
This fucking crazy, fuck the police and all that shit, which was really fucked up. These guys were speaking up, but they said, I've seen documentaries on that NWA was like created, they were created to cause divide in LA. You had the LA riots, you had the fucking Rodney King beatings and shit like that. So there was a lot of hypertension down there. It was like a powder keg down there, and it did blow and it did cause a lot of shit, but they were actually putting certain artists in these gangster rap shit to cause divide, freak, white women out that were at home raising kids. It was like, oh, this is,
Yeah, there's a big conspiracy on Tupac, dude. And it's like, it just crushes all these, it crushes all these guys that love Tupac, right? Because I grew up, that was the first like rapper I heard, dude. Mikey turned me on to Tupac when I was in like third grade, and I was like, this is the best thing ever, dude. This is great. And but they go back, dude, and Tupac was like a college dude, and he was in a dance club, and he was like and I don't know the whole conspiracy, but it's basically like they're like, hey, this guy was kind of a I'm not gonna say it, but he's kind of fucking feminine, I guess, right? And it's like now he comes onto the scene and he's some big gangster hardcore guy, but it's like they got clips and whatnot of things, and it's like it was kind of like an industry plant is what they kind of made it seem like, but it's all backed up by conspiracies and whatnot.
It's like you look at Eminem and all that shit. That dude was totally created in a laboratory. I mean, that dude was just like it just created. He wasn't that guy. I don't know. I never saw him as a talent. He just seemed like a fucking mouthpiece. And, and then, obviously they're saying now that P. Diddy fucking had a lot to do with Biggie and Tupac because he owned the rights to their music, and without them contesting or without them involved, that's how that's how these music moguls do work. And
it was at the time before cell phones were probably a thing, but it was like before like the iPhones and stuff. But it was like it was far enough along in technology where like they had all these like tools and shit. And I think a lot of things are mixed up along the way because there's not much evidence of things that actually happen in documentation.
I know this, that fucking P. Diddy isn't that fucking sharp. He had somebody above him. Like, I don't know who's that one fucking guy that wigged out on concert and had to leave or whatever, that Jay-Z or what's the other guy's fucking
Kanye.
name?
Diddy was before Kanye, though. Kanye came after, but he was a part of it.
Came out, called it, I mean, that guy called it, and they labeled him fucked up. They said he was crazy. They said, hey, they say a lot of people are fucking crazy. They're saying Candace Owens is crazy, but she's right fucking 90% of the time. So are they crazy, or is it someone in the elite group up above in the record companies fucking suppressing these people, just mining fucking tons of dough? Yes, I believe that more than I believe that fucking some guy lost his mind. That's what I think.
You got these figures that are like, at a level where people believe in these guys and they listen to them and they idolize these people and these figures, and it's like they have more power than they have the people's view of them, right? So it's like, hey, this guy is like, Kanye is like considered like not a Martin Luther King guy, but like, he's got a lot of a huge following across the whole world, and it's like that's a lot of power and stuff. And it's like, hey, who's to say these guys aren't manipulating this guy, and that's what it seems to be.
that music industry, it's just like they say, the people who own Warner Brothers are just, I mean, they're just corrupt motherfuckers that have gotten their hands on everything. It's just Hollywood money. And that's all they're after. And they use these people that there's nothing left. And when they're done with them, they discard them and they find the next fucking, and I kind of always felt that Eminem was, Hail Mary, the desperation dude, he comes out with a movie, he talks back, it's like, dude, get the fuck out of here. This guy was so fucking phony. It was just really shit. It was just shit. His rap shit, his whole fucking story shit. But people at the time were fucking believing it. They were real,
Yeah.
they were and it was just, it was, you want to talk about a fucking psyop.
And that dude sold so many records, dude. That guy sold a lot of records. But the one thing I will say, it's like, I'm not a fan of him at all. But when it comes down to the craft of like putting down rhymes on paper and using double entendres and metaphors and similes, these guys break it down. It's not my taste, but if you actually look at the craft of how he uses the words with this and how he's
so much that guy created his own style. They promoted this guy. They paid for everybody to believe this shit. This was fucking force fed down your throat that this guy was the new guy. It was fuck this, fuck that. I'm down with this. That dude's a turd. He's always been a turd, and it was bought and paid for. That dude was a prop. That dude, it's all theater.
Well, I get that. It was all theater. And even on his album cover, there's the red curtain behind him, and he's on the stage, right? But what I'm saying, I guess, like when you go into the craft of rap music, when it comes down to like actual like rap, and I know you're not big in the rap scene, so I'm kind of just at least telling you, like it was all about like, whose rhymes did this and how did this rhyme correlate to the last rhyme and how did that rhyme correlate to the whole theme of the rhyme and the scheme. And it really goes deep on the lyrics and stuff. And he's considered to have some of the best shit that correlates throughout. Am I a fan of it? No, but the guy did have some pretty badass wordplay when it came down to it at the end of the day.
Alone. There's that comedian that fucking does it's on YouTube, and I think it's that guy that got canceled. I forget his name. It's not Russell Brand, but it's a dude that looks like Russell Brand. And he's sitting in his garage and he's bored. And he
George Carlin?
No, fuck no. This guy was he just got busted for sleeping with underage girls like 4 years back, and he was like an up and coming. He looks like Russell Brand, and he's kind of from that fucking little genre there when comedy was getting big, and they were kicking out good comedians like every fucking 2 weeks.
Okay.
And this guy got chopped off the fucking list immediately. But if you look it up on YouTube, it's hella fucking funny, right? And he's sitting there and he goes, this guy doesn't even make sense when he fucking raps. He goes, who listens to this shit? And he starts imitating him, and he starts making up these. It's so fucking funny because it's so. This guy. It was like, this guy's the worst rapper I've ever heard in my life. It's like none of this shit makes sense, and none of these words go together. It's like whatever style.
Went to the park to walk my dog. My dog went over here to go down the slide.
Bro, whatever style that guy had, he stands alone because nobody else had it. And he is. He's just.
This guy, yeah.
Great white hope, and he sucked. He sucked from the day he started.
That guy did.
At least it was like sound like a little fucking kid on a fucking merry-go-round, and but hey, whatever. It was just the times, and that's the way it is. But I could just go on and on about music. It doesn't. It never gets old for me because I enjoy it so much, and to see you get really into it was always fun for me too, because it was like, though I hated that fucking. I didn't hate it. I just was. It's for young kids, that are angry at their parents or going through puberty. That's what rap's about, and then you get a little bit older and you think, this is fucking ridiculous. These guys all talking about the same shit, whatever, I got a gun, I got this bitch, or it's just like that shit is rap is dead,
Yeah, well, I think that's what really kind of sparked our whole thing with the whole father-son duo deal is like, hey, I had it was kind of based off of music. It's like, hey, like I'm interested in this stuff. You're like, hey, dude, there's all this good stuff back here that you have no idea about, dude. Let me teach you something, Sure. But what I will say though is like there is a cool niche sound that's there's a lot of knowledge and stuff. I mean, I'm more back on your side, but there is cool things like I was trying to say, like the rap lyrics and stuff, with this and that.
life. You can't erase. My dad told me he would give me $5 if I took that Angus Young poster down. My dad hated fucking AC/DC. Fucking hated. He goes, those screaming motherfuckers, turn that shit off. He gets so fucking pissed. He goes, why you got that fucking asshole on your wall? He goes, I'll give you $5 to take that stupid motherfucker down. He hated Angus Young or whatever. But he was just a young dad that was like, totally shocked by the shit. And that's usually what it is. It's like his dad was shocked by the shit he was listening to and felt the same way. And, obviously, I wasn't so distant from you to where I didn't know, most of this is shit,
A lot of it was shit. A lot of it was shit.
Well, it was just like, hey, try this. This was cool when I was young, and that might have been Too Short or Two Live Crew or, these motherfuckers were bringing heat, and they had good rhythm and good beats, but it just wasn't from, what you're listening to and what I was listening to. It's just a different time in life. And, you can't erase that, it's not that, there used to be a lot of shame in music, it's just like, who the fuck's listening to this? I mean, it was a war. It was a war. There was no cell phones. MTV was just coming out. MTV fucking ruined the fucking music industry, they would constantly play, you had to stay up to midnight to watch some fucking killer Judas Priest or some fucking, it was Headbangers Ball. And it would only be on for an hour and be, 15, 20 minutes of fucking commercials. And they would bring like Guns N' Roses on when they first come out. They'd be on Headbangers Ball drinking and fucking smoking and trashing the studio. And it was like, yes, this is good. But most of the day it was fucking 80s pop shit, Michael Jackson, Thriller, or fucking whatever the fuck. Duran, who's listening to this shit? But they would just play it so much that people would get into it, and it was just like such a fucking scam, Yeah, and it was just like, Flock of Seagulls or fucking Thompson Twins. These guys were one-hit wonder bands, but they would play the song so much on the radio.
That other guy, that stupid guy? I forget. There's two dudes. It's a blue background. I forget. That might be Duran Duran. I don't know. There's one that's fucking. That's good stuff though for people like me though. And not nowadays not so. But like when I was young, it was like hungry like this is cool. This is groovy.
It was actually one of the good songs that you could sit through. But when it came out, you're like, what is this? I mean, these guys look like fucking girls. I mean, they look so gay, and it was just like, fuck, man. I mean, just at that time, it was like, oh fuck, people were in the closet because there was hate, and people weren't fucking down with fucking. There was no rainbow flags.
It was a divide. Yeah, it was a divide.
People would get their ass kicked for having the wrong album, or digging the wrong band, and it was clannish. It was real clannish. Like there was metalheads, there was,
you got the greasers, and you got the jocks and shit like that. Yeah.
Like, that punk rock was just so fucking shitty. It was just like, I tried to, there was some stuff that I kind of, but it was like, they were really fucked up kids that were smart and mad at their parents. And that's how they rebelled was this shit. And the music was just fucking god awful. Or I was brought up, my dad taught me a lot about good music, Van Morrison or Rolling Stones or like early fucking George Thorogood or, just whatever the Who, whatever band, my dad was always good about that and always had a killer stereo system like I did. And he always, he let me fuck with it and, play what I wanted to and stuff like that. But from your grandmother having the radio on 24/7. That's why I always got the radio on, because my mom would always turn off the TV and say, turn that shit off, and she'd have the radio on. And it was always just KFRC, 50s classics or 60s classics or what, they were, whatever was kind of, on the local mom station or whatever. And it was always good music. It was always, good stuff. But, and back then they wouldn't play the same songs consistently. Radio was different. They had a live person behind the microphone. He was picking records. He was, taking calls. It was really enjoyable. It was really personable. And he would do a trivia question or a contest or something. You could win, free dinner, free tickets. It was fun.
I think they still have that. I mean, like, they got those guys. I forget what station is. Those guys, Bob and Tom. They're great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Not my deal there. Those guys are
hate
horrible.
Bob and Tom, dude. Those guys are the fucking worst.
They're bad. And then it's gotten so bad that two guys can't carry the show, so they've always added a girl now.
Yeah, and she's so irritating. She's big yuck joke. And dude, they just yuck all morning. I'm like, dude, are these people even real, dude? This has to be AI. If there's anything AI, it's got to be these fucking three assholes.
Well, then, and then at a pretty young age. I think I was probably 18, 19, and I started, getting into Howard Stern heavy. My dad was a huge fan, and my brother was a huge fan, and I was a huge fan. And it became a contest to, it was like, well, we ain't missing today. I'm listening, so we had that fucking radio glued to us because that dude was just fucking off the wall. And there was a small percentage where he was real crazy in New York and he broke a lot of records in New York, but he learned how to satellite his fucking, I forget what they call it. I forget the name, but it was just, you could transfer if you found a radio station in downtown LA that would play the station from New York, he's the one that bridged that gap. He's the one that started that. And they call it something cool. I can't think of the name. It's super common, but
live streaming?
No, it's not live. It was way before.
But that's kind of like, it was kind of like the initial live, like this guy would go live and you had to tune in to catch him live, right? And it was like, you wanted to hear the live shit.
We could record it and then play it out here, an hour behind and still be like up to date and on time, right?
Right.
So it's at 6, it was going over there. It was getting off the air at 9. It would come on, so you always thought you were listening to it live, which it was pre-recorded for an hour, I think, because of the time gap. But
okay, right.
Anyway, the point being,
no one had phones that even tell, is you just fucking rolled with it.
So if you got these big city markets where he started selling his show, pretty soon he's in Miami, pretty soon he's in St. Louis, pretty soon he's in San Francisco, LA. And so he started capturing all these markets, right? And it was not simulcast. Simulcast? I think it was simulcast. And so he would simulcast to all these big cities. And he started taking over the market. He became the biggest disc jockey in the world and probably one of the fucking most talented ones I've ever, So he was doing, he would do whatever was happening. It was celebrities, it was gossip, it was fucking music, and he had good musicians on there. I mean, all of them.
Yeah.
Fucking all of them in his movie, everything. So it was always fucking killer. And they would get on there and they would fucking open up and talk about their real lives and their real personalities. And it was whether it was a fucking comedian, a supermodel, a fucking rock star, the fucking mailman, the garbage man,
the drug addict on the corner that he brought up and just asked him what he was doing.
He was fucking interesting as fuck, and he would say the most outlandish shit. He talked shit about the blacks, the Jews, the Italians, the Puerto Ricans, the Mexicans. I mean, that dude. And it was just good racist humor.
Well, because the biggest thing was what that guy was a Jew and he grew up in the Bronx and he got bullied for being a Jew, and so he ended up becoming like some black belt because he was Jewish. And
I think it was more. It was like Roosevelt Station or something. It was just kind of it was at a time when he grew up where they were mingling, intermixing schools. Like you had white schools, you had black schools. You lived on the bad side of town, you lived on the good side of town. Well, they started fucking intermixing, and he said he used to always get his ass kicked because he went to a predominantly black school and his mom wouldn't move out. She's like, no, we live here and we're staying here, and she was real adamant about it.
Right, and when you're a Jew, or you're Jewish, it's like you're different from even the other people that are your skin color too. It's like you got Christian.
In New York, it's like the Jewish population is so fucking big that it's really not that fucking, it's really not that crazy,
okay.
But it was an issue, it definitely was an issue, but it wasn't much of an issue because in New York, there's a lot, it's a big Jewish, so it was, but he would make fun of himself as much as he would make fun of anybody else. So it was like, it was fair game,
Yeah.
People call him in and say, you big, hook news Jew bastard or where, and he had a big fucking schnoz and shit, and he'd go, oh, up yours, and he would talk shit back to him. But man, I tell you, that dude, you get in the truck in the morning driving to work, and I'm laughing before I got to work. I'm laughing at work. I laughed all fucking morning. It was just, there was nothing like it, and he kind of, there were some people on the show for a long time that he ended up getting rid of. There's like everybody hated this guy, and Howard would constantly pick on this guy. He'd single out one dude and just pick on this dude to fuck. I mean, just no mercy about his mother, about his wife, about his fucking dad, his fucking family, his job, and how shitty he was at. And it was so funny because then the rest of the crew was so happy it wasn't them getting their ass chewed out that they would all glob on. So it was just like this big glob on. It was like Smear the Queer.
That's the
and
best.
They would just pick one. every day.
That's how we grew up in the neighborhood. That's what it was. You'd all just pick on one, and then
just one person out, and everybody bullied the fuck out of them to no end. And if you could handle it, you could stay. But if you couldn't handle it, you had to fucking go. And that was the rule. It was fucking street rules.
That's
you
the
know?
best. I think that stemmed into my childhood a lot because of Howard. Because that's how you that's how you raised us. But that's what we did in our neighborhood. We had the one kid, and
it's kind of what immature people do, I guess. Or whatever the fuck it is.
the one kid in the neighborhood, you just bullied them.
Normal, and he wasn't against. He'd have lesbians on and have them make out and shit and take their clothes off, and and he'd go, oh God, he'd go, oh, she's so hot, or oh God, she's so. He goes, Jesus Christ, she looks like my mother. He would talk hella shit, and these girls would take it, and it was all good fun. They would giggle, And the butterface contest, this chick had the best body but the ugliest face, and these chicks would line up to do it. Just take the shame and the beating. I mean, it was just like so fucking crazy. And it was just like, it took balls to go on that show, man, because he would have you doing some, hey, why don't you get naked for $500 from Sofa King? Sofa King's gonna give you $500 to get naked. And they go, oh no. And they go, hey, how about they start out at 100 and they work their way up to 500. By 500 doing outlandish shit, you know what I mean? Naked, fucking jumping off the fucking roof. And so it was just all in good fun. But and then Artie joined, and Artie was the dock worker, cokehead, drinking beer, sports guy. He was like your average blue collar dude from fucking Jersey or down on the docks in New York. And he brought the real big, because Howard was such a cunt and such a, sissy that, he'd go, oh, this or oh, that. He was a spoiled Jewish kid.
And Artie would fire back at him? Is that what it was?
He just brought the regular blue collar, did construction, could, talk sports, talk about, betting and, just all the good shit that most of the guys going to work, were.
Could relate to, yeah.
Yeah, and so it just made it that much better. But, they had their falling out or whatever, and Artie left the show. And as soon as Artie left the show, it just really went downhill after that. It was really bad, but no matter what, wherever we were at a family get together or whatever, we just say, I'd look at, my brother and my dad and go, hey, did you hear, Stuttering John said, and we'd start laughing, we'd talk about it. And, the sound effects guy was super cool. He could do sound effects like right in real time,
right.
And he would do the, and it was just super entertaining, for a long period. It was probably, I probably did a 12-year run where I didn't miss an episode of that. And if I did, I watched it on TV when I got home.
Yeah, I remember being a kid walking in, and it was just like being a young kid and seeing whatever the fuck they were doing on the TV. It was just like it was a studio. It was dark. It was blue. You got this guy with these hippie glasses on and this long hair. Yeah. And I'm like, it wasn't SpongeBob on Cartoon Network or whatever it was. It wasn't Nickelodeon.
He really knew a lot of different shit. And he was really smart, and he would he would talk about what was going on in the world, or like the OJ trial, or anything like that. And he would bring experts on. He would get the people that testified. He'd get them to come on, and he'd be like, "Hey, this is bullshit. Why'd you say this? And what'd you do this for?" And they would explain it. And it was just like, it was cutting edge news. But they hated that dude, man. Everybody was out to get that. They would find that guy every 2 days for something, and it just always caused a lot of problems. But he was the underdog fighting back. And I mean, he talked about this Marion Barry. He was the governor of Washington, D.C., and he got caught in a hotel smoking crack. He was a black dude. He was smoking crack and banging these hookers, right? And every morning he'd open up talking shit about this dude, and it was just so fucking funny because it was like, you put a bad newspaper article about you, about a week, the shit goes away. He wouldn't let it go, dude. He would just drown these dudes in fucking shame. We
didn't forget about that, dude.
No, he would talk all this shit. He had a TV show. He'd dress up like him, and he'd act like he'd be smoking crack, and he'd put chalk around his lips and shit. And I mean, it was just like, it was fucking crazy humor, But a lot of people didn't like him. There's a lot of people that go, oh, he's, I can't stand her, and that was cool. But that was one thing me and my brother and my dad always bonded over was Howard. And my dad goes, hey, did you read his book? And I go, no. And he goes, oh, fuck you. Well, I remember my dad was, I kept the bookmark. I think you might have a copy of that book. But anyways, it was, I think it was Private Parts, or it was the second one, or I forget which one, Miss America. It was Miss America because he was dressed up as a woman on front. And my dad bought it, and he put the receipt in the book. And I always use the receipt for the bookmark. And I mean, that book was so fucking funny. I mean, he talks so much shit. Michael Jackson, OJ. I mean, just fucking smoked the room, scorched earth with those guys all day long. And it didn't matter if it was a president, a governor, or whatever. He would, but he would give people their props too that were, actually doing a good job. So it was pretty fair journalism. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely something that that is lost in today's time. I guess I think the only thing I could kind of relate to is Kill Tony. That seems like honestly Tony kind of took a lot from Howard, and he doesn't ever talk about that. I don't know if he did, but
everybody's ripped him off. It was just like you would see these guys trying to imitate him and try and get something going, and it was just like if you were a Howard fan, you could smell it a mile, and you're like, who is this fucking ass? That's why I always bitch about Bob and Tom, because I'm like, these guys are still on the air. They suck when they started. It's like that Lamont and Tonelli. God, those guys were so fucking bad. I mean, they ran that shit into the ground. They were pretty funny for a Bay Area act. They did some funny shit, but
nowhere near to the level of Howard.
Just ran it past the fucking finish line. Like too many years past the finish line. These guys should have hung it up on a win instead of run it past and milk the place in. And I'd still see guys. They'd still be laughing and going, "Oh, did you hear it?" And I'd just be like, "Whoa, man!" Dude, that joke is played out. It was.
You're like, dude.
You're on that level, dude. Get away from me.
That's when the divide happened. You're like, hey, dude. Yeah. Stay away. Like, don't call us. We'll call you, dude. Stay away from me. If you're not listening to what I'm listening to, dude.
It was critical to have good crafted humor, right? Because a bad comedian is a bad comedian, and if you got someone writing for you that's a bad writer, it just doesn't make you any better. But Howard had fucking good writers; they were funny, and it was crafted humor to where he would take you out there on a ride and then fucking whip it around and come up with a punchline you didn't see coming. And that's just great comedy.
Yeah,
it's a craft.
Yeah,
that's a talent.
That Kill Tony, because it's very similar in a sense where these guys, they're all lining up to jump on Kill Tony, and they're waiting in this bar, and you might get your name pulled, and if they do, then they come up, and if you suck, he lets you know, but then he asks hard hitting questions. Like everyone wants to go in there and just say their darkest secrets, and he gets these questions, and he starts off with some random shit, and then he ends up getting to the good shit somehow. But Red Band's got the soundboard too, and
Red Band sucks. That is a turd.
That guy is a turd, and I think they bag on him, and it's like that guy needs to grow the fuck up, in my opinion.
Well, he was like the fat engineer on Howard. They call him Scott the Engineer, and they that's where I got the black cloud from, because they had a cutout. There was a black cloud every time he'd walk in the studio. Someone would stick it over his head. He was the Kiss of Death. They would call him the Kiss of Death and shit. And they started a band one time, and they called it the Losers, and they said we could go against any celebrity band out there. We'll be better than you. I guarantee it. Howard put a contest. So we got Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie from who'd Flutie play for? He played for
Dolphins?
Denver or
Miami.
One of them, Doug Flutie. I think it might have been New York at the time.
I'm not sure. I want to say the Dolphins, but I could be wrong.
But he was more my era, right? But he was a pretty popular quarterback at the time. But he had a band on the side, and Howard always said, "These guys suck," or it was, there was a couple of them, like Johnny Depp had one, and it was like a side project. They were millionaire actors or millionaire athletes, and they sucked, and they just did this for fun. And so he put this thing out there. Well, Howard starts this band, and this fat engineer dude says he's a drummer, right? And so he goes, "Oh, we're gonna," and they just immediately like, "Dude, you suck. Get the fuck out of here." They just fucking totally threw this dude out, and they brought in some other dude that didn't even know how to play, and they taught him how to play. It was just such a shame, pitiful. It was just so sickening what they would do to that guy.
Dude was halfway decent, but they didn't like him, so they just hammered him.
Yeah, and then they would do a song, and it was pretty funny. It was great because the sound guy he did play the guitar. He was an actual guitarist, and that Stuttering John was actually a bass player. And so Howard said, "I'm the singer." Well, then they needed a drummer, so Scott said, "Oh, I can play. My kid, I taught my kid how to play. I'm good. Let me in." Everybody wanted in on this, right? Because you get so much popularity from it, and it was so watched, and so it's like being Instagram famous, right?
Yeah, it was the platform.
Bro, if you can get on this one segment, man, you could get free lunch forever downtown New York. I love you. So it was just kind of different times, but
that's what they say about New York. Yeah, if they liked you in New York, dude, they hook you up.
So anyways, it was just constant shit like that. Like, I'll put on YouTube now and go back to old, and they would get in fights and feuds, and people would be pissed, and fights would break out, and Ronnie the limo driver, he was a little Jewish guy that was Howard's security guard and limo driver. Well, he was his limo driver, and then Howard said, "Hey, I need security here. Why don't you just be security and stay in the building the whole time? So when I leave, I'm ready to go. You can just." He's like, "Okay." Well, Howard was paying him pretty good, the radio station was paying him good, but they would bag on. This dude was like this angry dude that thought he was hot shit, and he get these fucking stupid tattoos of his dead dog and shit, and it was like they looked so bad, and Howard would talk so much shit about his cologne, his outfit, they would just smash this dude all day long, and he was short. He was only like 5'3" or 5'4", and they're like, "What's this guy security for?" They really laughed at him. So it was just a lot of good stories there, but. And then there was Robin. She was the black sidekick. So even when it went a racist way, she would laugh and go along with it. They really neutralized it because they kind of had a little bit of everybody in there. They had Italian, they had black, they had Jewish, they had, one of the dudes was a Mexican or Spanish, whatever the fuck he was, Menendez. So it was equal opportunity. Nothing was off the table. And, it was great. I enjoyed the show.
And it went with the music and stuff too. It's like, hey, you're a musician, you're on Howard and whatnot. So
it was what's trending. He was the X of that time. He was like, he would bring in people and they would just spill their beans and their. They got the new album coming out. They're coming on. And that's cool that you could hear the artists and stuff too. Hearing shit like that, it sucks because like, man, I would have liked to be alive for that time. He was around so long that. Nobody had Ozzy on for an interview, and Ozzy would only go on that show. And his kids, when he brought them in, they were like 4 and maybe 8. They were little kids, like the what's that ugly daughter's name that he's got, and Jack.
I don't
they were
know.
Just little kids. And he would bring them on, and he would be so fucked up on pills and drugs and shit and alcohol. He'd be in there drinking, and Howard would start asking the kids, "Hey, do you know your dad's a superstar or whatever?" And they're like, "Hey," they spoke English, and they'd be like, "Oh no, my dad's quite great," and this and that. And Ozzy'd be like, fuck, I ain't fucking going to St. Louis and playing. It was just, you couldn't understand what he was saying either. He was like, his voice was so fucked up back then, you couldn't even understand. And Howard would have to ask him like 3 times certain things, and he would just mumble through it. But huge. Trump was on there, when Trump was a millionaire, he'd just call in and, just like huge people like that it was just so insane. Clown posse. I didn't know who those dickheads were, but Howard would always have them on because they were so fucking controversial, and it was just super funny. They got in a war. It was Sharon Osbourne and Insane Clown Posse got in a big fucking fight, and they bet $100,000 that Insane Clown Posse would sell over 250,000 albums in the first month or whatever, and they were kind of getting popular, and I think they actually won that bet, and she never paid them, but. Shit like that, drama shit.
Yeah.
Theater, big time wrestling shit. It was all in good fun. But we'll have to get back into the music thing, Cole. I don't know how we ended up on that, but anyways, hey, if you guys want to check out Danny Jones, we got Tinfoil Hat with Owen Benjamin. Looks like it's going to be a good one. Haven't watched it yet, but it just got dropped 2 days ago. Danny Jones, great. His latest one is the Dr. Yerkelwitz, or whatever the fuck his name was, is teaching or talking about conscience for AI, the digital god that we're going to be looking at. And Government Mule, new music that I found. Seems like I went through their best hits or whatever. Didn't find a song. I said, "Oh, this sucks." It was pretty good, old school rock and roll. Probably more for the dads, not for the youngins. But that's my 2 cents. Cole, you got anything?
Hey, well, if you guys listen all the way through, if you're my age or in the millennial, Gen X, Gen Z, whatever you are, dude, go back and listen to some old stuff, dude. We'll hit you guys. I guess, Dad, if you're a young kid like me, dude, what album would you recommend someone my age to go back and listen to maybe get some inspiration, kind of give them a direction to go into to find some good music that we were talking about?
You just pick any of the classics. You got them all. You got Scorpions, Ozzy, Judas Priest, any of that shit's all.
The albums though, because there's some shit that's like fucking. Because there's so much you click on it. I mean, what your number one Scorpions album? What? Give them a Scorpions, a Sabbath, and a Van Halen.
Oh, it just takes a taste. Van Halen 2, I got behind me right there. That was my favorite. Love that album. It was great. Good times, kind of like beach rock music, upbeat, really good. I don't know. I always like Screaming for Vengeance on Judas Priest. Scorpions, you can go Love Drive, or you could go Animal Magnetism's a classic. That's like that was my introduction to them, and still holds the test of time today. Enjoy the shit out of that. Try that Y&T Black Tiger, local band, totally killer. Probably no skip on that whole album. Every song's ripper. Upbeat, if you're at the gym or something, it's good gym music, I would say. And that's about it. I have to give some more thought into it and direct people, but you could start there, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, shoot. I'm going to go listen to that Black Tiger album because I forget about that album. That album's so good. And I haven't heard it in so long. I remember you playing it when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, dude.
Yeah, we wore that fucker out probably in the 7th grade, man, one summer. Yeah. And my buddies, we just played that thing every day, all day, and, till we couldn't take it no more. But
and then besides that, I guess fantasy football's coming up. I got my fantasy football draft. If you're listening, I'm excited to do my fantasy football this year. I hope everyone's getting their player sheets ready and shit, and I'm looking forward to that. I know you're not in on that fantasy shit, Dad, but I've been listening to all types of podcasts, getting my guys down and seeing who's up, and it's exciting because I got a draft coming up next week with all my buddies from high school. I think we're at like 10 years now. So I want to get get a trophy for all of us, but it's like $180 for a trophy. We just do like some bullshit, Buffalo. We just do some bullshit.
I got a connection in the trophy department. If you come up with what you want, let me know, and maybe I can get them made it and then sent.
Okay, cool. Because I'd like to do it, but yeah. So we're getting excited for that. And besides that, man, great episode. Love talking about music. I'm glad we covered it. We had some other shit to talk about, but nothing crazy. Just the same old fucking AI bullshit we've been talking about. That's always good to talk about. And love listening to some music history, man, and talking music. That's for sure, Dad.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so, I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below if you listen to those albums, and let us know. Drop us down below what albums you're listening to, and put us on some new shit if we haven't heard it, and we'll review it. If you drop a comment down below, we'll listen to it, and then next week we'll cover it and let you know what we thought. How about that?
Copy that.
All right. Later.